Cold open, a caravan in the midnight desert. The desert wind howls like a wounded animal across the Anatolian plateau. Under a moonless sky, a caravan of 30 camels moves through the darkness, each footfall sinking into sand that remembers centuries of journeys. The travelers haven't slept properly in 3 days. Their eyes scan the horizon, not for landmarks, but for threats. Bandits haunt these routes, preying on the exhausted and vulnerable. Every shadow could conceal danger. Every rock formation might hide ambush. Suddenly, the lead camel stops, nostrils flaring. The handler follows its gaze to a distant flicker of light. Not a campfire, but something more permanent. Stone walls rising against the starry sky. A collective exhale moves through the caravan. They know this place, a caravanserai. Behind those walls await warmth, food, and the priceless luxury they've been desperate for: safe sleep. For these travelers, tonight won't be another night of rotating watches and jumpy exhaustion. Tonight, they'll experience what few modern travelers ever know: the profound security that lets human beings truly rest. What is a caravanserai? Evolution from ribat to han. What exactly were these structures that offered such protection? The caravanserai represents one of the most sophisticated hospitality systems ever created, a medieval innovation that transformed travel across the Islamic world. The term itself comes from Persian, caravan, meaning caravan, and sarai, meaning palace. But these were more than just roadside inns. They were purpose-built fortresses dedicated to traveler safety. The concept evolved from earlier structures called ribats, which began as military outposts along frontier regions. The word ribat comes from Arabic roots meaning to bind or tie, originally referring to places where warriors would tie their horses before battle. These early structures served dual purposes: military defense and spiritual retreat. Soldiers would spend time in ribats, both guarding borders and engaging in religious contemplation. As Islamic civilization expanded, so did the need to secure trade routes. The ribat evolved into something more comprehensive: the caravanserai. By the 10th century, Arab geographers documented over 10,000 such structures across Transoxiana alone. The Seljuk Turks perfected the concept when they established their empire across Anatolia. They understood that economic prosperity required safe passage, and they built accordingly. These institutions went by many names across the Islamic world: Han in Turkish, Caravanserai in Persian, Funduk in Arabic. But regardless of name, they shared common features: fortified walls, guarded gates, and services that addressed every traveler need. They represented a remarkable convergence of military engineering, economic policy, and social welfare, all organized around one simple idea: that sleep shouldn't be a luxury afforded only to those safe at home. The realities of travel in the Middle Ages and the need for sleep. To understand why caravanserais mattered so much, we need to appreciate the actual conditions of medieval travel. Journeying between cities meant facing multiple threats simultaneously. Bandits and highwaymen were constant concerns. Travelers carried valuable goods and little protection. Natural dangers included extreme temperatures, from desert heat that could dehydrate a person in hours to mountain cold that brought fatal exposure. But perhaps the most underestimated danger was sleep deprivation itself. Modern research shows that after just 24 hours without sleep, cognitive function drops by 25%. After 48 hours, it's equivalent to being legally drunk. Medieval travelers faced weeks or months of compromised alertness while navigating dangerous terrain. The exhaustion made them vulnerable to poor decisions, slower reactions, and increased accident risk. The physical toll was equally severe. Travel meant constant vibration from animal movement, irregular meals, and exposure to elements. Without proper rest, immune systems weakened, making travelers susceptible to diseases that might otherwise have been resisted. Sleep wasn't just about feeling rested, it was about survival. The body's repair mechanisms, tissue regeneration, and immune function all depend on quality sleep. Yet the architecture of travel worked against this need. Sleeping outdoors meant vulnerability to animal attacks or human threats. Sleeping in shifts provided some security, but meant nobody got full rest cycles. The caravanserai system solved this collective action problem. By providing guaranteed security, It allowed every traveler to experience complete, uninterrupted sleep. This wasn't just hospitality. It was a public health intervention centuries ahead of its time. The system recognized something we often forget, that security isn't just about physical protection. True security allows psychological surrender to rest, the ability to close one's eyes knowing that vigilance isn't required. In a world filled with threats, the Caravanserai created islands of temporary safety where human beings could experience the deep, restorative sleep that sustains both body and mind across long journeys. Seljuk vision, securing trade routes. The Seljuk vision transformed Anatolia from a dangerous frontier into the world's most secure trade corridor. They understood that economic prosperity required more than just military conquest. It demanded systematic protection of commerce. The great Seljuks recognized Anatolia's unique position as a bridge between Islamic and Christian worlds, and they engineered this geographical advantage with remarkable sophistication. Their approach resembled modern infrastructure investment more than medieval kingdom building. They established what might be considered history's first state-sponsored travel insurance system. If merchants lost goods to bandits or natural disasters, the Seljuk treasury would compensate them. This guarantee transformed risk calculation for long-distance trade. Suddenly, the most dangerous routes became financially viable because the state absorbed the uncertainty. The system extended beyond financial protection. Seljuk military units patrolled key trade routes, providing armed escorts through particularly dangerous stretches. They established checkpoint systems where caravans would register their passage, creating both security records and valuable trade data. The state maintained these routes, building bridges where rivers threatened passage and clearing paths through mountain passes. This wasn't just about generating tax revenue, though that certainly followed. The Seljuks understood that secure trade created multiplier effects. Artisans settled near protected routes, creating local industries. Markets developed around major caravanserais, connecting rural producers to international trade networks. The security infrastructure attracted foreign merchants who brought not just goods, but knowledge, technology, and cultural exchange. Perhaps most remarkably, the Seljuks maintained this system while constantly facing external threats from Crusader states and Byzantine remnants. They prioritized trade security even during military conflicts, understanding that economic strength sustained military power. The caravanserais themselves often served dual purposes. During peacetime, they protected merchants. During conflicts, they became military supply points and defensive positions. The sophistication of their thinking reveals itself in the geographical placement of these structures. Caravanserais weren't built where land was cheap or construction easy. They were positioned at precise intervals, matching caravan daily travel distances. They occupied strategic locations controlling mountain passes, river crossings, and desert entry points. Each site was chosen for maximum security value, often on high ground with clear sight lines approaching threats. This systematic approach created what modern economists would call a virtuous cycle. Security attracted trade, which generated wealth, which funded more security infrastructure. Within generations, Anatolia transformed from a conflict zone into the medieval equivalent of a special economic zone, a region where commerce flourished because the fundamental conditions for safe exchange were systematically guaranteed. The Seljuk vision understood that true power comes not from controlling territory, but from enabling movement through it. An architectural revolution, the physical features of caravanserais. The architecture of Seljuk caravanserais represented a revolutionary approach to protective design, structures where every element served both practical and psychological purposes. These weren't just buildings. They were carefully engineered environments optimized for security and restoration. The typical caravanserai followed a standardized rectangular plan, though some featured more complex layouts with courtyards and multiple sections. Construction used locally sourced stone, with walls reaching up to 2 meters thick in some cases, not just for defense, but for thermal regulation. These massive stone walls kept interiors cool during scorching summer days and retained warmth through freezing nights. Entry was controlled through a single monumental gateway, large enough for fully laden camels, but designed for easy defense. These gates featured intricate locking mechanisms and were often reinforced with iron plating. The entrance tunnel typically included a raised threshold, not just a defensive feature against rushing attackers, but a clever drainage solution that prevented water from flooding the courtyard during rainstorms. Inside, the layout followed a clear hierarchy of spaces. The central courtyard served as the heart of the complex, where animals were unloaded and cared for. Surrounding this stood arcades and galleries where travelers could rest while remaining protected from sun or rain. The ground floor contained storage rooms for goods, stables for animals, and sometimes workshops for repairs. The upper level housed the sleeping quarters, simple but clean rooms where travelers could finally rest securely. The separation was deliberate: animals and goods below, humans above. This vertical division prevented disease transmission and reduced noise, creating conditions conducive to actual sleep rather than just shelter. Perhaps most remarkably, many caravanserais incorporated sophisticated water systems. Underground cisterns collected rainwater, while intricate channel systems distributed it throughout the complex. Some featured hammams, bathhouses where travelers could cleanse themselves after weeks on dusty roads. This attention to hygiene was centuries ahead of European inns, where cleanliness was rarely prioritized. The architectural intelligence extended to climate control. Vents and openings were positioned to create natural ventilation, drawing cool air through spaces during summer months. In winter, hypocaust systems, channels beneath floors that carried heat from central fires, warmed the sleeping areas. The combination of thick stone walls and targeted heating created remarkably stable temperatures year-round. Defensive features blended seamlessly with comfort considerations. The high walls and corner towers provided lookout positions, but also blocked winds and created acoustic insulation. The single entrance facilitated control, but also created a psychological threshold, crossing into a space designed entirely for protection. Every architectural decision served multiple purposes: security, comfort, hygiene, and psychological reassurance. This architectural ecosystem represented a holistic understanding of traveler needs, recognizing that true rest required addressing physical safety, environmental comfort, and mental peace simultaneously. The stone walls standing across Anatolia today still testify to this sophisticated approach, that protecting human vulnerability requires addressing every aspect of the restorative experience. 24-hour service, daily life in caravanserais. As the sun began its descent behind the Anatolian hills, the daily rhythm of the caravanserai shifted into its most active phase. The arrival of a caravan wasn't a chaotic event, but a carefully choreographed ritual perfected over centuries. Guards atop the walls would spot approaching travelers from kilometers away, giving the complex time to prepare. The massive iron-reinforced gates would swing open just as the lead camels reached the entrance, creating a seamless transition from dangerous wilderness to secured sanctuary. Inside, a well-rehearsed division of labor unfolded. Stable hands immediately took charge of the animals, guiding them to designated areas where they would receive water, fodder, and medical attention if needed. Meanwhile, travelers were directed toward the hammam, the bathhouse, where hot water awaited after days or weeks of dusty travel. This cleansing ritual served both practical hygiene and psychological purposes, washing away not just dirt, but the accumulated stress of the journey. The evening meal followed in communal dining areas. Unlike modern restaurants with individual tables, caravanserais featured large halls where travelers sat together on floor cushions, sharing food from central platters. Meals were simple but nourishing: hearty stews, flatbreads, and seasonal fruits. This communal dining wasn't just about efficiency, it fostered connections between travelers from different regions, creating impromptu networks where trade information and route conditions were exchanged. As darkness fell, the security protocols intensified. The massive gates closed with a finality that signaled the transition from day to night. Guards took positions on the walls and towers, maintaining watch through the darkness. Inside, the atmosphere transformed from bustling activity to purposeful quiet. Travelers retired to their sleeping quarters, where clean bedding awaited, a luxury unimaginable for those accustomed to sleeping on the ground. The night watch system operated with military precision. Guards worked in shifts, maintaining constant vigilance while minimizing noise that might disturb sleeping travelers. Their presence wasn't hidden. The occasional footstep on stone or quiet conversation between guards actually reinforced the sense of security. Travelers could hear their protectors at work, creating what sleep scientists now call secure base signaling. The awareness that vigilance is being maintained by others, allowing deeper psychological surrender to sleep. At dawn, the process reversed with equal organization. The call to prayer signaled the start of the new day, but departure was never rushed. Travelers received a morning meal and time to prepare for the journey ahead. Animals were inspected and reloaded with care. The gates opened only when the caravan was fully ready to move, ensuring no last-minute vulnerabilities. This structured daily cycle, arrival, cleansing, nourishment, security, and departure, created a predictable rhythm that itself became part of the restorative experience. The spiritual atmosphere of the Ribat, the religious foundations of secure sleep. Beneath the practical operations of the Caravanserai lay a deeper spiritual foundation that transformed these structures from mere inns into sacred spaces of protection. The concept of Ribat originated in Quranic teachings that emphasize both physical and spiritual preparedness. The Quranic verse, "And prepare against them whatever you are able of power and of steeds of war," used the term Ribat in its original context of military readiness, but medieval Islamic scholars expanded this concept to encompass the broader protection of travelers. This spiritual dimension manifested in several ways within the Caravanserai experience. Many structures featured prominently placed mosques or prayer rooms, often positioned near the entrance as a reminder that protection ultimately came from divine grace rather than human effort alone. The act of hospitality itself was considered a form of worship. The provision of safe sleep to weary travelers carried spiritual merit that paralleled more obvious religious acts. The staff who operated these complexes often included religious figures, imams who led prayers, Sufi dervishes who provided spiritual guidance, and scholars who might offer instruction to interested travelers. Their presence reinforced the idea that physical security and spiritual security were interconnected. A traveler could find not just physical rest, but spiritual renewal within these walls. The architectural design frequently incorporated symbolic elements that reinforced this spiritual mission. Inscriptions above doorways featured Quranic verses about protection and mercy. Decorative elements included patterns that symbolized unity and connection, reminders that all travelers, regardless of origin or status, shared common humanity under divine protection. This intentional design created what modern psychologists might call a holding environment, a space that contains anxiety and supports psychological vulnerability. The financing model itself reflected spiritual values. Many caravanserais operated as vakuf institutions, Islamic endowments where wealthy patrons donated property whose revenues would permanently fund traveler services. This wasn't seen as charity, but as spiritual investment, the use of worldly wealth to create ongoing spiritual merit through perpetual service to travelers. Donors understood that their legacy wouldn't be in stone monuments, but in countless nights of safe sleep provided to generations of travelers. Perhaps most importantly, the spiritual climate addressed the psychological dimension of fear that haunted medieval travel. In an era where journeying meant facing very real dangers, the Caravanserai offered more than physical protection. It offered psychological refuge, the knowledge that one slept in a space consecrated for protection, operated by people who saw their work as religious duty, created a depth of security that mere walls alone could never provide. This integration of practical protection and spiritual purpose created environments where travelers could experience what few modern humans ever achieve: the complete surrender to rest that comes from feeling truly and completely safe. Continuity and change in the Ottoman Empire. When the Ottoman Empire rose from the ashes of the Seljuk legacy, they inherited not just territory, but an entire philosophy of protected travel. The Ottomans maintained the caravanserai system while adapting it to their expanding imperial needs. Rather than abandoning the existing network, they expanded it, stretching these islands of security across 3 continents as their empire grew. The fundamental concept remained unchanged: guaranteed safe passage through protected rest stops. but the implementation evolved significantly. Ottoman caravanserais became more integrated into urban environments, often constructed within city centers rather than along remote trade routes. These urban Hans served dual purposes, providing accommodation for traveling merchants while also functioning as commercial centers where goods could be stored, traded, and taxed. Architecturally, Ottoman designers refined the classic caravanserai model. They maintained the fortified exterior walls and single entrance for security, but expanded the interior commercial spaces. The typical Ottoman Han featured two courtyards, one for animals and storage, another for human accommodation and business activities. This separation became more pronounced, reflecting the growing complexity of trade networks. Perhaps the most significant Ottoman innovation was the Menzelhain system, carefully spaced stopping points along major routes that functioned as miniature fortified towns. These complexes included not just accommodation, but mosques, baths, repair workshops, and sometimes even medical facilities. The spacing followed the same logical progression as Seljuk caravanserais, approximately 30 to 40 kilometer intervals, matching a day's travel, but with expanded services reflecting the empire's greater resources. The Ottomans also extended this protection philosophy to maritime routes. While not caravanserais in the traditional sense, harbor fortresses and protected anchorages served similar purposes for sea traders. These coastal installations provided safe harbors where ships could restock, repair, and wait out dangerous weather. Maritime equivalents of the desert caravanserais that had protected land travelers for centuries. The modern sleep crisis and lessons from history. Today we face a sleep crisis that medieval travelers would find incomprehensible. Unlike those ancient merchants who could count on guaranteed secure rest every night of their journey, modern humans navigate a world actively hostile to sleep. Our problems aren't bandits or wolves, but something more insidious: constant connectivity, artificial lighting, and productivity cultures that treat sleep as wasted time. The contrast reveals a profound societal shift. Where medieval civilizations invested enormous resources to guarantee secure sleep, modern society treats sleep as an individual responsibility. We've medicalized sleep disorders while ignoring the environmental factors that make healthy sleep nearly impossible. The average person today sleeps less than 7 hours nightly, far below the 8 to 9 hours that were standard before electric lighting. This sleep deprivation carries staggering costs. Research links insufficient sleep to increased risks of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and Alzheimer's. The economic impact reaches $411 billion annually in the United States alone from lost productivity and healthcare costs. Yet we continue designing cities, workplaces, and homes that actively undermine our ability to rest properly. The Caravanserai philosophy offers a radical alternative perspective, that sleep security should be collective responsibility rather than individual struggle. These medieval structures recognize that environmental design determines sleep quality more than personal discipline. Their thick walls created acoustic isolation long before soundproofing materials. Their circadian-sensitive lighting, candlelight and darkness, maintained natural sleep rhythms. Their security protocols address the psychological dimension of feeling safe enough to surrender to sleep. Perhaps the most valuable lesson lies in their understanding of sleep as infrastructure. We invest billions in roads, bridges, and telecommunications because we recognize their economic value. The Caravanserai system recognized that sleep infrastructure delivers comparable returns. Healthy, well-rested people make better decisions, create more value, and require less healthcare. Their approach was fundamentally proactive rather than reactive, preventing exhaustion rather than treating its consequences. This historical perspective challenges our modern assumption that technology automatically improves sleep. While we've developed sleep trackers and smart mattresses, we've simultaneously created environments filled with sleep-disrupting blue light, constant notifications, and work pressures that ignore biological limits. The Caravanserai model suggests that true progress might involve removing barriers to natural sleep rather than adding technological solutions. The psychological dimension remains particularly relevant. Modern sleep anxiety, the inability to quiet one's mind despite physical exhaustion, might be addressed by the Caravanserai's holistic approach. Their combination of physical security, spiritual comfort, and community support created conditions where anxiety could genuinely relax. In our hyper-individualized world, we've lost the collective structures that once supported psychological surrender to rest. Ultimately, the Caravanserai legacy invites us to reconsider what true progress means. Does advancement require sacrificing rest for productivity? Or might the most sophisticated society be the one that best protects its members' need for restoration? The silent stone walls across Anatolia suggest that civilizations are remembered not for how much they accomplished while exhausted, but for how well they enabled their people to recharge, a lesson that grows more urgent with each sleep-deprived generation. Lost rituals, the history of sleep hygiene. The daily rhythm of the Caravanserai created what modern sleep specialists would recognize as ideal sleep hygiene practices, not through scientific understanding, but through cultural wisdom refined over centuries. The transition from journey to rest followed a deliberate sequence that prepared both body and mind for deep restoration. As travelers entered the fortified complex, they moved through spaces designed to progressively lower arousal levels, from the bustling courtyard where animals were cared for, to the quiet upper chambers where sleep awaited. This transition ritual began with physical cleansing in the hammam. The warm water did more than remove dust. It signaled the body that the day's travel had ended. The drop in core body temperature following a warm bath is now known to trigger sleep onset, a physiological response the Caravanserai system exploited intuitively. The communal dining that followed served similar biological purposes. Eating at consistent times before darkness fell helped regulate circadian rhythms long before we understood the science behind them. The architecture itself enforced sleep-conducive darkness. Without artificial lighting beyond simple oil lamps, the Caravanserai respected natural light cycles. As night fell, the complex grew progressively darker, allowing melatonin production to follow its natural course. The thick stone walls blocked not just sound, but the faint light of stars and moon, creating darkness profound enough to satisfy modern sleep laboratory standards. Perhaps most remarkably, the Caravanserai system understood the social dimension of sleep hygiene. Travelers from different backgrounds slept in shared spaces, creating what anthropologists call social sleeping. The presence of others provided subconscious security signals that facilitated deeper rest. This contrasts starkly with modern isolated sleeping arrangements, where the absence of communal signals can increase nighttime anxiety. The gentle sounds of other sleepers, breathing, occasional movements, created a rhythm that soothed rather than disturbed. Much like parents' presence helps children sleep more securely. The morning awakening followed equally deliberate patterns. The call to prayer provided a consistent wake-up time aligned with dawn, maintaining circadian regularity even for travelers crossing time zones. The gradual increase of activity, from quiet prayer to breakfast preparation to animal care, created a gentle transition into wakefulness that avoided the jolt of modern alarms. This entire ecosystem, from arrival to departure, constituted a sophisticated sleep hygiene protocol that modern science is only now rediscovering through sleep studies and chronobiology research. Architecture and psychology, the impact of security on sleep. The psychological impact of Caravanserai architecture reveals perhaps the most sophisticated understanding of sleep environment design prior to modern neuroscience. These structures weren't just physically protective, they were psychologically containing in ways that directly facilitated restorative sleep. The massive stone walls created what environmental psychologists call defensible space, environments where perceived safety matches actual safety. This psychological security operated on multiple levels. The single, heavily fortified entrance created a clear boundary between the dangerous outside world and the protected interior. Crossing this threshold triggered what neuroscientists now identify as a shift in autonomic nervous system activity, from sympathetic dominance, fight or flight, to parasympathetic activation, rest and digest. The architecture itself served as a psychological cue that vigilance could be temporarily suspended. The spatial organization within the Caravanserai reinforced this sense of containment. The nested design, courtyard within walls, rooms within galleries, created progressive layers of security. This hierarchical space organization mirrors what attachment theorists describe as secure base dynamics, where each layer of protection allows deeper psychological relaxation. Travelers could literally feel themselves moving deeper into safety as they progressed from entrance to sleeping quarters. The acoustic environment played an equally crucial role. The thick stone walls created a sonic bubble that isolated sleepers from the unpredictable noises of the outside world. But within this silence, the caravanserai maintained purposeful sounds: the rhythmic footsteps of guards on patrol, the distant murmur of other travelers settling in, the familiar sounds of animals being cared for. These predictable, non-threatening sounds provided what sleep researchers call auditory anchors, reassuring signals that protection was ongoing, allowing the brain to disengage from threat monitoring. The thermal design contributed to psychological comfort in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. The stable temperatures maintained by thick stone construction prevented the nighttime temperature drops that trigger primitive wakefulness responses. The hypocaust heating systems provided gentle, consistent warmth that mimicked the security of sheltered environments. Modern sleep studies show that temperature stability is one of the most important factors in sleep maintenance, a principle the caravanserai builders understood through empirical observation. Perhaps most importantly, the caravanserai system recognized that security is relational rather than absolute. The presence of guards, the sounds of other travelers, the knowledge that experienced handlers cared for the animals, all created a web of mutual protection that no individual could provide alone. This collective security allowed what psychologist Stephen Porges calls neuroception to shift. The subconscious threat assessment system could finally register safety, permitting the vulnerability required for deep sleep. The architecture facilitated not just physical protection, but the psychological conditions necessary for true restorative rest, a lesson modern sleep environment design has largely forgotten in its focus on individual comfort over collective security. The Caravanserai legacy and modern wellness understanding. This architectural wisdom speaks directly to our modern wellness movement. The Caravanserai system understood that true well-being requires environmental support, that we sleep better when our surroundings actively facilitate rest rather than merely permitting it. Conclusion: sleep as a forgotten human right. Their legacy challenges us. What if we treated safe sleep as fundamental human infrastructure rather than personal responsibility? Perhaps true progress means creating environments where rest becomes possible again, where we can all sleep as securely as those medieval travelers behind stone walls.